John from Port Neches has a question about insulation.
His walls don't have any.
Well, that's a shame.
John writes, My 2-story apartment building, brick building in a gated community, does not have insulation in the walls. What are my options to correct that?
The key to this question, I always look at the words very carefully. People think I'm all over the place, but I listen very carefully, is apartment.
Mm-hmm. When
you're in an apartment, you rent.
Well, how do we know he doesn't own the apartment?
Nobody owns an apartment. They own a condo.
Somebody owns it. What do you think? They like appear on Earth?
There's nothing you can do. And quite frankly,
if it was, let's say it was a brick house and he didn't have it in the walls.
Okay, let's start with this. I get a lot of questions from people who rent apartments, and they want to have their apartment like they would have their own house. So I'm going to start with that, and then I'll answer your question. You can't. I mean, if you rent a place, I just want to give this out to people. I give this advice to my children because they're still renting apartments and stuff. If you rent a place that has problems, you're not going to be able to fix them. If the landlord won't, then what you need to do is move.
I was going to say,
I'm very serious about that.
The trusted company you need to call is either U-Haul or Ryder.
That's pretty much it. Now, if you didn't have insulation in a wall in a house, you probably wouldn't be writing me because it wouldn't have been that big a deal. A lot of people in apartments think about the noise and they're trying to save on a energy bill in a little box. Even if you had insulation in that apartment, you have all these other apartments packed around you, and they actually can increase the heat load or do other things. You can smell the cigarette smoke, what they're cooking. I mean, there's just nothing you can do about it. It's very hard to add insulation into a wall in a house that's already built unless you're gutting it or you're building a new one. You pretty much live without it. Now you can put radiant barriers in the attic. You can put insulation in the attic. You can get high-efficiency air conditioning systems. You can call Jim Fumey and get new windows. You can do a lot of stuff that will save a lot more money than trying to tear up your whole house to put insulation in the walls. Very, very difficult to do. So you attack it from another aspect, which would be on your house. But in an apartment, you usually don't have an attic, and you usually don't have windows you can replace, and you don't have the option to do those things.
How much heat gain really comes through the wall?
13% in a typical home in Houston. Think about it. 80% of the heat gain from a house comes through the attic. Your heater is the sun, it's on top. Out of that 80% through the attic, 80% of that is through radiation. That's what we call low-mit for radiant barriers, right? So it stops that big heat gain. Walls, 13%. Now, some houses have a little more. If you have a 3-story home like they have inside the Loop now, you see a lot of those. They have a lot more proportion of wall to roof. So that proportion will go up a little bit. But then the other percentage, which is I think 7, is going to be doors, windows, things of that nature. So you can see the attic is where you attack it first.
Attack the attic.
Attack the attic.
But in this case, call a moving van.
But in an apartment, you really need to move if you don't like where you live. I told my daughter that about 2 nights ago, and she's actually moving now. She didn't like her apartment.
Sage wisdom from Tom Tynan. And you can find a lot more of it by visiting HomeShowRadio.com, clicking on the Ask Tom tab. That's where you find lots more of these videos from the Dolly Tommy.